Hey guys, it's Doc from Gold Hog, and today this is our information overload video. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be touching on some basic subjects from the past. I'll address some things we talked about in the past, but some things that are new as well. Some of you are here for the first time, some of you have been watching all of our videos, so I don't want to spend too much time on some of the subjects that we've covered before. If a lot of these things we've covered pretty extensively, so you can go back to some of our older videos, which are very long and very detailed, and you can find a lot of that information there. One of the key things I'm going to start with is, what mat should you use? What setup should I use? And I think that's one of the key questions we get a lot. We get emails from people and we hear that a lot as far as, what mat should I use? I have a dredge, here's my dredge size, here's my high banker, this is, what's the best mat to use? So I'm going to touch on some stuff because it varies so greatly. One of the things that I want to address though is, if you'll notice from the way that we market the products, some of the videos that we do, we're not real pushers. In other words, we're not hypers, we don't try and push this product on people. It's just not the way I operate. The way that I operate and the way that I demand that everyone that's associated with this product operates is, we're going to give you the information. We may not give you all the answers, but we're going to give you plenty of information. We're going to show you plenty about this mat, and then we're going to let you decide. Because a lot of people are going to get this mat, and we want to make sure that they get the right mat, hopefully, the first time. And they're going to have to play with it. They're going to have to play with their system, their high banker, their dredge, whatever, and they're going to have to adjust those dials that we talk about. And of course, those dials are water volume and pitch. But we talk about that later on, and I'll address that later on. But briefly in this video, like I said, we're going to touch on subjects, and we're going to move on. We're going to touch on subjects, we're going to move on. So we're going to try and go through it. I'm going to address which matting possibly you should use for which piece of equipment. Some of the issues that we think are really important. I might throw in some past footage so that you understand things, but mainly I'm going to try and make you think. I'm not going to try and tell you, because we're not the experts. All we've done is we've done over a year of research on this, and that's sort of how these products, we stumbled onto them. And we're going to share with you why we came out with them and why we think they're good. A lot of people test their equipment and say, hey, I'm catching a lot of gold. Well, anything can catch gold. And I say it all the time. You'll hear me say it from time to time. If you put a bunch of dog poo in a sluice, it's going to catch gold. You can use, they used to use wood slats. They used to use canvas. They used to use all kinds of stuff, burlap, to catch gold, and they catch gold. So it's not rocket science. And that's not what these mats are supposed to do. It's not a miracle cure. It's not a golden egg to get to 100% recovery. What it is we designed this specific mat for more high volume production. That was our whole point. Typically in the past, what you've seen is, like, you go to a more commercial operation or a higher production operation, they make their sluice longer and longer and longer. And we're going to address that issue a little bit later on. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to sort of say, well, you don't have to go longer and longer and longer, you just have to go more active. So we're going to talk about, that has to do with the exchange rates. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why we came out with the mats, what they do. Are they perfect? No, they're not perfect. Nothing is perfect. But what we mainly want to point out is we're trying to reduce loss rates, to find an acceptable loss rate at a high production level. So that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to say, what's our loss rate? We test different settings, we test different materials, flow rates, pitches, mats, setups, so on and so forth, and we try and find the best loss rates under heavy pressurized conditions. And I will tell you that we've sort of changed our testing a little bit, because we used to take a percentage. We'd put, say, 10–20% black sand, and then we'd put medium material, and then we'd put lights in there, and then we'd salt it with gold, different sizes, and run it. And we've got to the point that the light material is irrelevant, we feel, in this mat, because it just flows right over it. The lights just never really get involved in the process. So we actually reduced it down, and now we go to heavies. I mean, when we run our tests now, it's about anywhere from 60 to 80% heavy material. It's almost solid black sand. There's a little bit of lights mixed in, or mediums I should say, a lot of garnets and heavy gem type crushed material. But it's real heavy stuff. So that's what we're running through now. We're trying to find, we know the mat is going to kick out the lights, but how long can it actively exchange those heavy materials? Because that's the key element. You've got to be able to exchange those heavy materials if you're going to run a long time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on, we're going to move to a couple things, and we'll go on from there. And you should see a title flash telling you what we're about to address. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to BAGEM. And BAGEM is sort of an acronym for our ultimate gold catching machine, BAGEM, but it's a badass gold extraction machine. And the reason why we call it BAGEM is because it's one of the few things we found that's 100% gold recovery. Not 99, but 100. We've never been able to get this system to miss a piece of gold. So that's why we call it BAGEM. It's badass. Unfortunately, you really can't take this system into the field with you, but in a way you sort of do, and I'll show you what we're talking about. But I just want to walk you through it real quick. We have a regular test sluice that you guys have probably seen, or if you haven't seen, you're going to see. And then the test sluice drops down into this unit that is it's a Frankenstein little short sluice that we used to use that we put on this now. We used it for something else. But inside here we have a piece of vortex that everything hits as it comes out. And it's not to catch material, it's to divert water flow. And then it goes into this reverse slant tray right here. This reverse slant tray, all the water goes into that reverse slant tray, has to stop and then come back the opposite way before it drops in to the lower tray. Excuse my bucket move. Then it drops down here and it enters into this tray right here. And inside this tray is a piece of vortex that starts off at a slant and gently slopes a little bit. So it starts off and slopes a little bit up. Then it exits into the next layer, and then we have vortex that's on a very low pitch. Then that drops into another tray down below, so anything that is absolutely missed by this little contraption here falls into a second bucket down below. Water filters out through the top, everything, all the sediment goes to the bottom. It catches 100% of the sediment. And then that bucket is then taken out and run through the gold cube. So the purpose here is not to catch all the gold. The purpose here is to catch all of the losses. So I hope you understand that. We had to come up with a way. We had to come up with a way to make sure that we were testing all of our losses or capturing all of our losses. So BAGEM is one way. It's a system. This is a big 60-gallon tub at the end, so we have a lot of clean water. Again, so it comes up here and it shoots down in here, rolls down, and then we take it. There's one more step where we feed it through the gold cube, and after we've tested the material at the bottom of the gold cube, and we have that rubber line inside there, and we've never had a single loss through this whole system as we run it. So I just thought I'd show you that, but that's BAGEM. That's one way we test our losses. I thought it was pretty cool that you might want to see. Okay, so I figured I'd give you a couple little tips. I'm going to throw in a bunch of little stuff here. Some of it has to do with the mat, some of it doesn't, but I think it's just stuff it's just like in a forum or meeting with friends. You know, you learn stuff and you pass it along, but I figured I'd just pass along some stuff real quick. Number one, this has nothing to do with the mats, but these are neoprene gloves, and I'm going to give you a little tip. At the end of hunting season, probably in January, I think, if you have a Sports Authority or Academy Sports or a sporting goods store, especially the big chains. When hunting season ends, they have a lot of cool stuff in there that actually we can use. These are neoprene hunting gloves, and they actually have a real rough rubber surface to it. They have a little wrist strap on it. But I bought these for $9 on clearance at the end of hunting season. I mean, they're made to keep hunters' hands warm, but we use them for dredging and for panning when it's cold, and man, they're great. For $9, you don't mind tearing them up. But look for them, that's a good thing. The other thing is I have a set of neoprene waders that are duck hunting waders with the boots on them, neoprene chest waders with suspenders, everything. And I think they're about $100 pair of chest waders, and I bought them for $39 on clearance. I mean, they're a steal. They're great for cold water if you get in there. I mean, even in the summertime, that water's kind of cold if you're in the mountains anywhere. But again, hit the sporting goods stores and go to the hunting sections and look for this stuff. You can find a bunch of stuff in there. Man, we cleaned up. I mean, everything was like 60% off. So we found a bunch of good stuff. Plus, if you need thermals or anything like that, it's a good time to get it. That's one tip. The next tip I'm going to talk about real quick is I'm going to talk about classifying, because we're about to do another run here. So I figured if you have dry concentrates, or really any kind of concentrates, especially if you're using a gold cube, or if you're going to go down to 1/8 of an inch, or no matter what it is, I take my bucket, and so let's say I'm going to classify to 1/8. I take a 1/8 screen and put that on the bucket. Then I take a 1/4 screen and put it on, and then I'll put a 1/2 screen on top of that. And what that does is it gives you a more visual perspective. A lot of times if you just have a big pile of rocks, it's hard to see nuggets. Plus it also allows you to screen more material. So I'll have very few, let's say 1/2 inch rocks, and I'll look at those real easy. If I have any gems in there, I'll take them out. I'll take that screen off. Then I'll go to my 1/4 inch screen. So now I've got rocks that are pretty much all the same size, that visually I can inspect them easier than, and just take a look at just the quarters or plus quarters. So I'm looking at that screen. Then I can go out and then I can visually inspect plus 1/8. And believe it or not, your eye can pick out nuggets a lot easier when you do that. So when you have all the rocks that are plus 1/8 in one screen, take a brief look at them, you can actually find nuggets a lot easier that way. Plus the other thing is if you want to run it through a spiral wheel, you can. If you're using a metal detector to screen over your nuggets, it's actually easier to do it when they're all the same size. Because I have a White's GMT, I think it is. But what I like to do is I like to have it go right over the rocks. Well, if I have 1/8 of an inch rocks all the same, I could smooth pass over those versus hitting the larger rocks as I go along. So even if you're going to screen with a metal detector, it's a lot easier to do it if the rocks are all the same size. And plus visually, when you spread them out and do it, it's a lot easier to do it too. So that's a good little tip. The other tip is when you're doing this, if you have dry concentrates, put a couple drops of jet dry in your bucket and then start, because as you're spraying, you have a chance, especially I let my water overflow a lot of times, and when you overflow, you can get floating gold. So I put a couple of drops of jet dry in there, and I stack it up, and then I spray with the hose all the way through. I'm not a shaker. I spray it down. While I'm spraying, I do shake it, but that's a quick little tip for you on there. So, okay. So now a couple little tricks with the mat. Number one, we've talked about the glue and the glue situation, and the mat's funny because I don't do the mats the way I tell you to do the mats. I cut my mats, I put them on a table, I put a line of super glue, and I pop together. That's how I do it. Then I put the top tape on, I flip it over, and I do the bottom tape. So while I'm telling you to do it one way, I do it another, but I've done hundreds of these things now, and if I make a mistake, I can just go grab another pad, or you can't. So that's why I want you to do it the safe way. My way is a lot quicker. I just cut it, put a bead, snap it, put a bead, snap it, put the small tape on, flip it, put it over, I'm done. I could do a big mat in probably 10-15 minutes. But again, this is the Gorilla Super Glue. You can get it at Home Depot, Lowe's, or you can order it online. It's about $5 for a bottle, I think. It's the regular super glue. It's not Gorilla Glue, the brown for wood. It's Gorilla Super Glue. And it's not slow dry or gel or anything like that. It's just regular super glue. The other thing is the Gorilla Tape. I figured I'd show you that. But that's what it looks like. You can get it at Home Depot, you can get it at Lowe's, you can order it online, it doesn't matter. But it's black, it's like a duct tape, but it's twice as sticky, and it's amazingly strong. And it's waterproof. I mean, we've had these mats underwater for 4 days and nothing wrong with this. Try and keep the tape dry before you put it on. Just, I don't know why, but keep it. I mean, we've welded machines in the field together with this stuff. It's amazing what you can do with this Gorilla Tape. It's great stuff, but it does come off. That's the important thing. It holds like crazy, but it will come off. So that's the Gorilla Tape, this and this and this. The next thing is the mat. This comes from feedback from people like you that one of our field testers was out and he found that the mats actually, the older they get, the better they perform. So we were like, well, why? And then we started thinking about it and we started playing with it, and it has to do probably with the coefficient of drag or coefficient of friction. In other words, if you were to turn this over, I'll explain this again, but I explain this later on, but if you have a piece of glass and if you put a rock on here, it'll slide right down the glass real quick. Piece of aluminum, it'll slide real quick. If you put a rock on here, it's just gonna sit here because this is a very tacky surface. And so gold likes to stick to this. So what we do, if you have a brand new mat, there really isn't resin. Because this is extruded, it's not molded and then popped out where you have a coating. But they're gonna be probably dirty. I mean, shipping and handling and everything else, you're gonna have dust on it. So I just take regular 409 and a clean brush. Just a regular brush, clean it, just spray it and I just clean it off. That's all I did. No special treatment, but you do need to clean it off. Don't make the mistake that one of our guys did, was to grab a brush out of his garage that he cleaned his tires with and it's full of oil and start scrubbing mats. Not smart. We have a clean brush that we just spray with 409, we scrub it, whatever. But somewhere around here, I don't know what I did. Oh, there it is. So, but what he did is, and on his new mats that he gets in, especially like on the scrubber mat where you have this ramp and you might have some smooth surfaces right here. What he does is he takes a piece of coarse sandpaper, or I should say medium. This is emery cloth, so it's medium grade. And he just goes back and forth a little bit, and he just roughs up those smooth part. And he put some real fine lines in there. So we looked at it under a microscope and we said, hey, that looks pretty cool. It's just gonna provide more resistance, and that's what we want. Gold is gonna be dragging along this mat. Everything else is just gonna be sort of passing by. The heaviest materials will drag. So like on this ramp, he actually takes the sandpaper and he goes back and forth on it a little bit and he roughs it up. So he gets rid of that sort of new looking surface and he just roughs it up a little bit. And it puts some microfine lines in it, and you can feel it. It actually makes it a little grippier almost. And I think what ends up happening, it's just like Vortex mat. Over time, you put a bunch of material over and over and over in this, it starts to wear a little bit and get marks in it, and it actually works better. So that's what we started doing. Whenever we have a new mat, we actually just take it if we have the time. We take it and we just run some sandpaper over the fine areas. Now we don't do it on the micro ones. Don't do it on those. But just on this main ramp and on this here. And we even tried doing it a little bit on the UR mat, on those top surfaces. We just sort of put a little grooves and we figured, why not? I mean, we haven't tested that. We don't really know. But it sounds like a good idea to us. I mean, anytime we can create resistance for something that's going across this, that's what we want. We want to slow it down. So we want to slow down the heaviest materials, and that sounded like a pretty good idea to us. So we've been playing with it. So anyways, that's my quick little section on tips and tricks, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll get more feedback from you guys. Okay, now let's talk about what mat you should use for your equipment. A lot of people that contact us are contacting us mostly because they have a high banker. Some people have dredges, some people have stream sluices, but a large percentage of these people are running high bankers. So I'm going to address that issue real quick. My personal favorite system in a high banker is it's called Doc's favorite mat, or my mat. This is the mat that I run in my system. So if I've done all this testing and I've worked with these mats all the time, I'm going to show you the one that I use. This is the configuration I use, and if anyone has a high banker system, regardless of the type of gold, whether it's extremely fine gold, or whether it's medium or coarse gold, whatever, this is the mat that I would use. And that mat is what I've got set up in my test sluice. We're about to do a test run on some fine material, really fine materials from the Midwest. But it starts off with the UR mat under your header box. It covers up your former slick plate. Then it goes down to scrubber mats. Then it goes down to solid UR mat, the under riffle mat, and it has 1/2 inch expanded metal on top. So, let me move my bucket. I'm going to talk about, I'll show you this more in detail when I go into it, but under the header box up here is just UR mat, straight UR mat. Then it goes in, it goes scrubber mat, scrubber, and then it goes into a straight UR mat, and on top of the UR mat we use the 1/2 inch expanded, and it's the steel expanded, not aluminum. The problem with the steel is when you get it cut, it's got razor sharp edges, and I mean razor sharp edges. I mean, it's like a hypodermic needle, so you need to go in there and trim those. But I use those to my advantage on this mat because you'll have little prongs usually at the top. And what I do is I bend those prongs down and it sort of grips the mat. It fits right into it and it works out perfect. And because it's nice and heavy, you can just leave it there with nothing to hold it. And the material will run right over it, and it's a great setup. You don't have to have any types of ripples on it. So that's the mat that I recommend for a high banker. For a dredge, here's the difference between a high banker and a dredge. And a high banker, you're dumping straight raw material into that header box, and it's mixing with water, and then it's coming down the sluice, and it's a much higher, it's a much thicker slurry percentage than it is with a dredge. So you may have a 50% slurry in a high banker, or even higher at some points depending on your feed rate, so on and so forth. It's a tremendous amount of material going through there. Versus a dredge, you may only have a 5% or a 10 or 15%, maybe up to a maximum maybe 20 or so, 20% material to water ratio. So a mat really doesn't have to be as active with a dredge as it does with a high banker. A high banker is, it's just like if you look at a commercial mine, that's just a mud running through that thing. And that's really where this mat was designed for. It's designed for those heavy run materials. So if you have a dredge, the nice thing about having a dredge is that you should have a decent amount of water flow going through your dredge. And the percentage rate of material to water, that ratio is low anyways, so you can actually lower your pitch way down. And if it were me, I would probably just use scrubber mat. Because there's such a low volume of material rolling through there, I just go straight scrubber almost all the way down. I probably would put a section of UR in the expanded metal because I'm a big believer in change. To me, it's kind of stupid to do the whole, it's very stupid to do a sluice bed the same way all the way down. We go into this a little bit later, but it's the definition of insanity, which is repeating the same action over and over and over, expecting a different result. So, I mean, if in my kind of sluices, I like to see at least 2, if not 3 or 4 different changes of different exposures to different material. You never know. There might be a round piece of gold that likes to roll, and it's going to get caught in a different section versus another. You might have some real fine flat gold that goes through. Well, maybe it gets caught in this type, but not in that type. So, I'm a big believer in changing it. So if I had a dredge, I would probably run mostly scrubber with a little small section of the UR with expanded over. Stream sluice is a totally different situation. Stream sluices typically don't have a great deal of water velocity, and it's real tough to adjust it because you've got it sitting in the stream and then the back end wants to float a little bit. It's real hard to control that. So if I have a stream sluice, more than likely I'm going to do all scrubber mat. That's all I'm going to put in my stream sluice, because if I've got a situation where I've got a slow flow, I'll be able to use it. If I got a higher pitch, the scrubber performs really well in that situation. Would I put the UR mat with expanded over it? Probably not in a stream sluice. A UR mat with expanded over the top of it, it really needs a lot of velocity. That's how it really becomes effective. That really becomes super hyperactive. In a stream sluice, it really doesn't do that. So I would stick with the scrubber mat. So if you've got a high banker, we're going to go with this variety, which is under the header box. You have UR, scrubber, 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 and then you go UR mat with 1/2 inch on top. If you have a dredge, I would go the majority of scrubber and a small section of the UR with expanded on it. I still would put a small section of that because it's amazing it's amazing the action on that. If I had a long box on a high banker, if you've got a 5, 6, 10 foot box, whatever it is, or it's a commercial operation, then I would alternate. And of course you are in the header box. And then I would go scrubber, a section of scrubber, a section of the UR with the expanded, and then back to scrubber, and then back to whatever. Constantly change it, expose it to different surface faces. So that's sort of a summary of what I would use where. And now what we're going to do is probably, I don't know what we're going to do next. I'm assuming we might go in and talk about and show you a little about how the mat reacts under different circumstances. Okay, so I think what we should do first is we're going to explain passive versus active matting. This for some reason, some people just don't get this section. And I will admit, it took us a while to sort of get this too, but once you figure it out, you start to go, oh, okay, now I get it. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about miner's moss, we're going to talk about carpet, we're going to talk about vortex, we're going to talk about R mats, talk about a couple different things, but again, I'm not going to give you all the answers. I'm going to make you think. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you what's right or tell you what's going on so much as I'm going to show you what we found through our research and then let you sort of think about it. You decide and try to open up your mind, not just make up your mind for you. First, let's talk about a passive mat. So this is miner's moss, and miner's moss has been used for years and years and years. And it's a decent collector of gold. It's a good mat. We still use it sometimes depending on the setup that we've got. Like I said, we vary the faces. So at some points, we will use some miner's moss in our material. It's not like we took it all away and threw it away. Then you have carpet. So whatever the carpeting is. There are several different carpets that are out there. Some people just buy carpet from wherever, but there are a bunch of different carpets that are out there. But these both are passive mats, and I'll explain why. This sits on, here's your sluice bottom, and this sits on top of your sluice bottom, and then material comes in and it falls onto this mat. So what's going to make that material move? So we're talking about exchanges later, but we want to exchange this material. In other words, we want light material to blow away, but heavy material to stay. So is that going to happen all by itself? A little bit it will. You could just put miner's moss in your sluice with nothing, no ripples or expanded or anything, and you'll catch gold. I mean, that's just the fact. If you tune it right, put miner's moss alone in your box, dump material through it, you'll catch gold. Again, you could spread dog poo on your sluice, run material through it, gold's going to stick. We've actually taken aluminum, spray painted it with textured spray paint. We've even used some of that rubberized material and run gold through. Guess what? If you set it right, you're going to catch gold. So it's not real rocket science. The problem with miner's moss is a lot of people start to think about, well, it's real deep and it has a lot of grooves and that gold's going to work in there and it's going to hold a lot of material. Well, it's an indiscriminate holder of material, and that's one of the problems with it. So when material falls onto this, all the material goes into here if it's small enough to work in here. And this mat, let's talk in terms of buckets, 5-gallon buckets. If you have this mat in your sluice and you run 2 5-gallon buckets through your sluice, I want you to take the mat out and I want you to weigh it. Take it and weigh it, and you'll understand what I mean. What we found is watching this mat underwater and doing some measurements on it is that after 2 5-gallon buckets, this mat is about 60 to 90% full. Let me repeat that. After 2 5-gallon buckets, it's 60 to 90% full. So this mat just fills right up. It's an indiscriminate holder, lights, heavies, it doesn't matter. If the water's flowing over, material hits it, it's gonna fill up. So what you have to do is you have to create an exchange. You do that by putting a riffle on it, by putting expanded metal on it. And now what you're doing is you're forcing water over a riffle and it's blowing down into the mat. And what you're hoping is that it's going to blow out or exchange material, and that the heavier material is going to stay. Okay? So that's what you hope. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And if you get too high on it, just like any other mat, your fine gold is going to blow out of there. Your fine gold is going to move first compared to a larger piece of garnet, let's say. Just because it's heavy, when you get it small, it'll move faster than something that has a lower density or lower density. Same thing with carpet, works the same way. You're hoping that you're trying to fine tune it because it's just going to sit there, and now you got to use water current to blow that mat out. It's passive, it really does nothing. So you have to use the water flow to make something happen to try and force that exchange out. Miner's moss, again, this was the problem. And if you've watched, I mean, even something like Gold Rush Alaska, if you watch them run, I mean, and they shut down after an hour's run because they got a problem. Take a look at the mat, it's just packed full of mud. So there isn't a lot of exchange going on. And that's one of the problems, you have a lot of losses. And that's what we found, especially shutting down early on a commercial operation, looking at the mat. And a lot of commercial operations have taken this and just gone away from it. A lot of commercial operations actually have gone away from the miner's moss and just gone back to carpet and improved their riffles and expanded metal and everything else. So carpet is not bad. Again, carpet will catch gold too. A lot of manufacturers still send their sluices with carpet in it, and for a stream sluice, it really isn't a bad solution because you don't have a lot of volume in there. So carpet, again, is not bad. Dog poo will catch gold, carpet will catch gold. So understand that. So those are passive mats. In other words, they just lay there, they don't do anything, there isn't any action. Now let's talk about an active mat. So I'm going to talk about an active mat. The first thing I'm going to do is grab a piece of vortex. Of course, I had to grab a piece of vortex out of the machine because I didn't have one sitting here. But if you take a look at a piece of vortex, there you go, you're going to see that it has a certain face pattern to it. And essentially what this does is it has a bunch of little squares and rough spots in it. So when the water flows over the face of this, what ends up happening is those little voids create little spinning vortexes. And those vortexes, the heaviest material, because it's active, light material will just flow over this. Heavy material will want to settle and be pulled into those little vortexes. So now you have a mat that essentially has created a false bottom. So now you have a false bottom where material is running, then you have a subsurface material, subsurface. The vortex is very small, you got to classify down to 1/8 of an inch. That's really its only drawback. But it's a great mat, we use it. And like we said, a lot of people say, well, I've been using Vortex. Well, we do too. I mean, Vortex is a great mat if you got the flow right. You start to push the flow on this, you start to get above 2,000, 2,500, or you start, I should say flow, I should say your velocity. You start increasing your velocity, all of a sudden now you've gone past the point where it's effective and you're starting to blow out some of that gold. The holding rate isn't as effective. So it's going to not hold as much. It's going to be too much exchange going on there. So it's a balance. It's like the gold cube. You know, the gold cube just didn't put itself together, the guys. They tested it. They tested it for the right amount of pitch, the right amount of flow, over and over and over until they got it right. Boom, it's all set up. You can take it out of the box, and there it is. So Vortex is an active mat, great mat, just understand its limitations. Same thing with the UR mat. And of course, I have my little cutout so you can see this. So this is the UR mat, and what happens, same thing, if you look at it small, the water flows across it, light materials come across here, larger materials come across here. But what ends up happening is when the materials come across here, if they're too light, they actually don't make it into the chamber and they'll hit this little ledge and bounce up, or if they're too big, they don't fall in here. That's why you can use, if you wanted to, you could use this mat alone if you had it tuned perfectly, and material will just flow over it. So the lights really just go over this thing. But what ends up happening is a little vortex is started in here. And if you turn it up, man, it really gets going, a really active vortex. But you have two sub-chambers that are inside the main chamber, these little ones, and these will be full of fine gold. And then you have these little angled walls. And these little angled walls, when gold wants to come up, it has a hard time trying. It has to go up this wall and then out an angled wall. And it just doesn't like to do that. So that's where it's affected. So that's the standard action of the vortex mat. That's how it becomes an active mat. Now, we recommend it. Here's where people get confused. A lot of people say, well, if I take, sorry, prop time. Here's a piece of the vortex mat. And now if I take expanded metal and put it on the top of this, well, aren't I cutting off the flow to the UR mat? What happens to the active exchange? And the answer is, you're just about right. You reduce the active exchange. What's interesting about the UR mat is that the connectors on either end will be a little bit higher. It's about 1/8 of an inch higher than the center here. So there's a little bit of a valley in here. So as the water comes through, expanded metal is going to have water come through anyways underneath it. But this allows a little more water to come in and you have a very gentle exchange. But what we like about it is not so much because it's really not going to be a hyperactive vortex in here. It will on some of the parts, but what ends up happening is because you have that expanded metal on top now you have a little vortex on here and it causes this juggling effect. It's this sort of violent little shaking action in here. It's a little jostle, and you'll see the stuff, and you'll see the close-up video, and I should put some up. But you're going to see this little jostling effect where just these channels just sort of become active. Now, if I had the expanded metal sitting on top of carpet, the carpet's going to be sticking through a little bit, so really just have little vortexes with the potential, that's it. But with this on top, now you have this large cavern underneath, and that's why we almost call this bedrock, because what ends up happening as the material that goes over the expanded metal and the gold gets trapped and it comes down here and there's this small and gentle exchange going on here, but it has a place to hide. It has a deep place to hide, so it has that subfloor again. So it's not the fact that there's a real active exchange going on here, it's the fact that now you've created a false bottom where if you really get this thing going, really get it active, you've got a place for gold to hide out of the current. So current's coming across, now all of a sudden it's a slow, gentle sort of jostling action and the gold can hide. And that's what we want. We want gold to be able to hide. If you have a piece of carpet, and you do the same thing, you put a vortex, you put a riffle on here, you put expanded on top of here, it's constantly exposed to this flow rate and you have more chance for losses than you do with something like that. So a lot of people say, well, I've used vortex, I've always used vortex under expanded metal. That's fine, it works, but you have to understand, I ask the same question. Okay, so I try and put this without being kind of a smart ass. I have to put this in a nice way to say, okay, vortex is an active mat. How do you make it active? You have material flow over the top. The mat becomes active when water flows over the top. Now you've got an active mat. So now we put expanded metal over the top of the vortex. What happens? You no longer have a flow over it. So it is no longer an active mat. But what you have done is you have created a more clean environment, a rubberized environment with little places for the gold to hold. So you understand that. It's similar to the UR mat, it's just that it's not as deep. So yes, vortex under expanded metal works really well. It works really well, and we use it sometimes. But we prefer to use the UR mat under it because there's much deeper chambers. You can really tune up your equipment, you can really start blowing it out, especially in a high banker situation. You'll see that there'll be a lot of material inside those grooves on the UR. So if you're using UR mat under a riffle or under expanded metal, you do not have an active mat. Let me explain that again. You don't. You have cut off the water flow across the face. You do not have an active mat. I'll say the same thing, but it's true to our mat as well too. If you take the UR mat and you put expanded metal over the face of it, you no longer technically have an active mat. But because you have a little bit of a void in here, you can probably, maybe you can see it, there's a little bit of a void in there between the rails, you do get flow underneath, which is nice. But it's a protected flow, so these chambers are almost dead from water flow. They're almost dead, but there's a little bit of an exchange going on. So that's why we think it's better than the vortex under expanded metal, and it's better in most cases we're using it with riffles. So now let me explain real quick with riffles what happens. And there's a diagram, I'll probably put this up, but you'll see that when you put a riffle on the UR mat, that again, you have a vortex behind the riffle and you have places for that gold to hide. You're going to have multiple actions inside these chambers. So let's look at that graphic, and you're going to see that inside these chambers are going to change. One will be a regular vortex, one will be a jostling action up here where the water's flowing down directly on it. One will be an actual reverse vortex. So you're going to have all kinds of these different vortex actions inside this map. Again, I would probably slow my flow or velocity down a little bit and let that action work. But that's why we like, in between here, you'll see that action. And if you have two riffles like this, let's say you have two riffles on there, what you're going to see is you're going to see material dancing in between those riffles. Because you've got a vortex here, and then you've got another vortex, but the material, you'll see it dancing around in between those riffles. And that's where this mat really works well, because there's places for the gold to hide that are they're safe from the flow of current, and then they can hide and drop in here. And the mat's weird because you look at it and you go, wait a minute, there's nothing in this one, there's a bunch in this one, and it's strange. But trust me, it works really well. But again, take the mat, put expanded metal over it, then put a riffle, then think about it. Think about what's going on under there. So now you've got hidden subchambers, plus you've got some more crazy little patterns going on here, plus you've got a riffle here. So if you ever want to give gold a place to hide, the UR mat with expanded metal and with a riffle, try it. That's all I can say. Try it, because there's so many places for gold to hide in this, and you can really fire this system up. I mean, you can really put some material through this. All right, so now we're going to talk about exchange rates. And I think this is probably, out of all the research we did and of all this, the one subject that I think created this whole project and this mat where this whole thing came from, I think understanding exchange rates is probably one of the most important things you can do. If you're a prospector or a commercial miner, once you open up your mind and let go of what you've thought of in the past and what you've seen in the past, and you start to give this option or this information time to set in, you'll start to realize it. And you may understand what we're talking about. So I want you to visualize in your mind a sluice. And I want you to imagine a sluice that's 10 feet long. So it's 10 feet long, and let's say it has miner's moss and expanded metal. So it has miner's moss and expanded metal, the whole 10 feet. So a lot of people don't know where that gold is coming from in their sluice, but we do. And a lot of commercial mines do too. But if you're finding gold at foot number 8, why? How did that gold get down to foot number 8? Think about that for a minute. If this is an effective system, then really all your gold should be caught up way up here. You shouldn't need this huge long sluice. So that sort of started this whole thing, and we started to say, okay, let's figure out what's going on inside that sluice. And it's pretty simple to understand. When you dump material, this mainly applies to high banking commercial operations where you're putting in a real thick slurry. When you dump material in, where does all that material immediately go? It enters the sluice, very, very heavy concentration. So what fills up immediately? Let's say that first riffle just loads up. And as soon as it loads up, well, where does the material behind it go? It goes to the next riffle. So if this one is full, you have material and gold going past that first riffle set into the next one. Now, you're putting so much material in, where does it go next? Okay, well, 1 is full, 2 is full, it's going to number 3. Then it's going to number 4. So as those slots, or as that area starts to get loaded with material, you'll see this where the rest of the material sort of slides by. And we'll probably put up a clip right now and let you take a look at that. Some of the old testing we did with miner's moss and riffles. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a heavy load up of this material up high, and you're going to see material just going by. So if the material is going by, where's it going? It's not getting worked by that first riffle set or that first area. It's being worked by the second one. And when the second one fills up, it's being worked by the third one, and so on and so on and so forth. So technically, you could have a sluice that was 4 miles long. But what ends up happening, so you put material in, the first fills up and it works its way down, and eventually it gets down. Well, typically there's a pause on a feed, and then that first one starts to clear out. There's an exchange, the second one, and then it starts to clear out. And you can see that action. Have someone dump a bucket of material into your high banker and watch it. You'll see that first section fill up first, then the second, then the third, and then eventually that first one starts to work back down, and you'll see it. And that's an exchange rate. So you're exchanging the material. The material starts to fill here, it gets washed out and moves down. And so one of the things we wanted to do is we said, well, how can we improve that exchange rate? So we looked at flow, we looked at pitch, speeding up material, reducing flow. Feed rates are often a big issue when it comes to commercial operation. They'll say, okay, you need to slow down your feed rate based on this. So they have it all, they have calculations and formulas for all that. But what we learned with our mats, and what we learned especially with something like a vortex or an active mat, is because you have this false bottom, really only the heaviest material is being worked. So the heaviest material is being worked in an active exchange, and the lights are just passing down. And that's what we wanted. So what we wanted is we wanted a quicker moving material, but we wanted the heavies to sort of slow down and be worked in an exchange. And you'll see that with our mat. When you dump material into your header box, the material moves rather quickly because it's rubberized. But what's not moving quickly is the gold and the heavy. They have a tendency to slow down on this mat, and they're being worked. So light materials move through quicker, the heavier slow down and get worked. That's an exchange rate. And so that is, I think, one of the most important things about when you get up to a higher production level is increasing your exchange rate, having that active, a higher, more rapid exchange rate. The more rapid your exchange rate, the more material you can use, and you can do constant, heavier feeds, and that's the key. That's really the key to collecting or finding a lot of gold, is having a system that catches gold well, having an active, rapid exchange, and then putting more crap into it. If you run more dirt, you're going to catch more gold if your system is set up right. So the active exchange is very important. So I hope I presented that in a way that you could kind of understand it. But I'm probably going to throw some video up that allows you to see that when you have a passive mat, like a miner's moss or a carpet, when that material hits it, it's going to sit in there, it's going to fill up, just like with anyone, including ours, it's going to fill up, and then that flow has to go in and sort of blow it out and blow it out and blow it out. You'll see with matting like Vortex and with our mat, is because you're having to hold less material, you'll see it moves through more rapidly, but watch how fast it clears, and that's what I really want you to see. I want you to focus on, okay, well, how quickly is it ready for the next batch that's coming? You got that? So this batch is in, how quickly is it ready for the next batch? That's a rapid exchange rate. So it's working material through quickly. Now, the battle of this, the problem with it is okay, if you have a real rapid exchange rate, you gotta have a floor that catches gold well. Otherwise, you run the potential for more losses. So it is a balancing act. We can turn up the exchange rate super high on this mat, and you can feed it dump truck loads all day on a 12-inch wide sluice. I mean, that's how fast it exchanges. But you're gonna increase your losses. So it's a balancing act. You've got to tune it. You want a rapid exchange, but at the same point, you want to keep the exchange rate to a point where you're catching the gold and not overworking the mat. Okay? So now I hope you understand why you can find gold further down in your sluice. And if you can do it at all, personally, that's something I would test out. I would test and I would say, okay, hey, I'm going to cut my miner's moss in 4 pieces. And I'm going to put it, and then I'm going to bring it out, and I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I'm finding equal amounts of gold, which you probably won't, but if I'm finding a lot of gold in number 4 and number 3, I've got to do something to increase my exchange rate because I'm not clearing through, that material is not exposing. If you don't do that, then you got to slow down your feed rate. You've got to give that more time to clear out, so you expose it to the surface that's supposed to hold the gold. If you don't have a surface that can hold gold and it's full of material that's waiting to be worked, then the other material just keeps going. And that's what we found. We found that sometimes you have to tune your system down and make it less passive because your feed rate's too high. So technically you're supposed to decrease your feed rate. Well, we wanted to keep our feed rate high, have it active, have that exchange, rapid exchange, but still be able to catch gold. And trust me, it's a balancing act. There are days when we're running this and we just set it up wrong. But anyways, I hope you understand that, and I want you to think about that, and especially if you go back and look at some of our old footage, I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to keep rapid exchange rate in mind. One of the most important things I think in gold processing. And I want you to think about it, keep that in mind while you're viewing that stuff.
Okay guys, I figured I'd put this up just to help you understand the complexity of everything that's going on in your sluice box. Now, you have to understand that it's almost like a bunch of dials sitting on the side of your sluice, your high bank, or your dredge, and it's up to you to understand them and control them. As an example, the first one we want to look at is water flow. The next one is pitch, and when we change those, we change the velocity, or the speed of the water. So you have to understand that increasing your water flow and increasing your pitch is going to increase your velocity, which makes your mat more exchange or higher exchange rate. Same thing. If we want to control different things like how much the mat is exchanging or how much of surface area is exposed, then we want to look at the feed rate. Maybe we want to increase the feed rate, or we can increase it because we have a more active mat. Then we want to look at the exchange of the heavies. It's not just the light material, but are the heavies being exchanged? And then as we increase the working or exchange rate on the heavies, are we having gold losses? So it's a balancing act, and it's very, very complex. But you have to get into it, especially with this type of active matting. You have to understand that all these little factors come into play, and it's a mixing game. Some days we'll have losses, some days we'll have no losses, some days we'll be able to run high material, some days we run low material. But all those gauges and all those dials are what you have to understand and you have to play with. And I hope that doesn't scare you, but I hope it opens up your eyes as to the complexity of setting up any kind of sluice, not just with our mats.
Now we're going to talk about the slick plate issue real quick. And I know everyone stresses about slick plates, but I really want you to sort of think about this and open up your mind. Like I said, we're not trying to give you all the answers. We're trying to open up your mind and let you think about this. I'm going to give you some variables, give you some things to think about, then you make the decision. But a lot of people want a large slick plate. And what's the purpose of a slick plate? Typically a slick plate is, of course, you allow your material to fall, and the slick plate, essentially, people say, well, let your gold settle. It allows the gold to settle and then travel and settle. So you have this real long slick plate and let your gold settle. That's what you want to do. Okay, so we'll buy into that theory. But what I want you to go back, and if you've looked at any of our research, you'll understand how quickly does gold fall. Gold falls really fast, even under turbulent conditions. Well, not necessarily turbulent, but under a little bit of turbulent condition, gold is going to be at the bottom, even fine gold. A 1 millimeter sphere of gold will fall approximately 48 inches through water in 1 second. 1 second, 48 inches through water. So it falls fast. If you ever want to try it in a bucket of water, take a little nugget, drop it, bam, it's at the bottom. So what we're saying is, if you have a slick plate made of aluminum, What's the difference? Does gold settle differently on aluminum than it does on rubber? I guess that's the question that I want you to think about this. So if you had an aluminum slick plate and if you had a rubber slick plate, would gold settle any differently? In other words, if there was no turbulence created in either one, both materials were dropping in the same header box, everything was the same, all the materials, it was falling and then having to go forward, would there be any difference in the rate that gold settles in those two? Now, I'll give you my opinion and what we've established from our research. The answer is no. There is no difference in the settling rate based on the material that you have at the bottom. What there is a difference on is that if you have a slick surface, and this gets into the coefficient, friction coefficient. And if you look at friction coefficients, there's different ratings on friction coefficients. So glass or steel might be a 0.6 on a friction. That means there's very little friction. As you put something at rest on it and try and get it to go down, you have 0.6. Rubber, like we use in the mats, is going to be anywhere from a 1 to a 2. So it could be a 1.6, 1.8. So you have much more resistance or much more friction on there as it's going. And that's what we want to work on. We know the gold is at the bottom, and what we want to do is we want to slow the gold down. You understand that point? I hope you're following me on that. I don't want to give gold energy, because when something's real heavy, it gets a lot of energy. Think of the difference between, I want you to, let's say you take the same throw. You're going to take the same throw, and you're going to throw a wiffle ball. A wiffle ball is going to go how far? Same trajectory. You're going to throw it, it's going to go about 20 yards. Take a baseball, real heavy baseball. Throw it, everything's the same. How far is it going to go? It's going to go 60 yards. Why? Because of the energy. It's heavier, so it's going to have more energy. Understand that? So gold, if you get it going, just like a filing cabinet. If a filing cabinet's light on wheels and you push it, if it's empty, it's only going to roll maybe 10 feet. If it's full of stuff and weighs 100 pounds, you push it the same, guess what? That thing is going a long way. The same thing with gold. We don't want to give gold energy through a sluice. That's why we always say, if at all possible, try and avoid the pitch, go with more water flow. So, now we've established, okay, so now you're starting to think, well, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. So let's say that he's right. Let's say that gold dropped on rubber is going to slow down faster than it does on the slick plate. Well, the other thing that happens, if you ever look at the bottom of a header box or an area where the water crashes, you're going to see all kinds of weird currents, all kinds of strange turbulence. And that's what we discovered. We discovered that in almost portions of that, if you put something in the bottom of that has holes and grooves in it, like matting, like our matting, it creates this weird, all kinds of strange flows, and some of it's actually like a fluid bed, some of it has some active exchange, some of it's just getting blown out. So, and I'm talking heavy, heavy water flow. And we discovered this actually at a crushing mine where they crush the ore. We put matting under our header box, and when we did that, we were catching anywhere from 40 to 60% of our gold inside of our header box, right at the bottom of our header box. And that opened our eyes, and we said, whoa, wait a minute. We would pull the mat out, and it would be full of gold. And we were like, something's wrong here. We've been told that first thing you need to do is you need to have a slick plate. Get that gold going, get it settling. And we're like, dude, that's wrong. We've just proven it. If you put the UR mat up under your header box, I'm telling you, if the only issue that you might have with that situation is if you have a lot of rocks that need energy to move, then you might need like a stream sluice. You got to have a slick plate with a stream sluice. If you put rubber in a stream sluice and you drop your material and there's not enough flow, it's all just going to sit there. So that's why you really can't do this in a stream sluice. However, if you have a high banker, a commercial setup, if you have a dredge that falls into a slick plate area, dude, get rid of the slick plate and put the UR mat in. That's my #1 recommendation. And what I'm going to prove to you is, I just ran one of our test runs, and if you've seen any of our test runs, we have a header box at the top, and I have 3 hoses going into it. We ran this at 3,300 gallons per hour going through here. So that's 330 gallons per inch, okay? So if you have a 10-inch sluice, that's 330. So, but all of that water was crashing into that header box, straight down into it, all kinds of turbulence. Some was going out, some was going over. It's just this constant big boiling situation. So what I did was, this time, is I actually fed the material, just like a high banker would, right into that crashing material. And now I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you a close-up of what that mat looks like under the header box. Hold on. Okay, so now we're at the sluice, and I just shut it down a little while ago. I shut it down maybe about 20-30 minutes ago. You can actually see gold in here. We're just playing around with some different pitches and angles. So now I'm going to take this off. I'm going to take my header box retainer off, and I'm going to show you something. So all the water was just simply just crashing in here and flowing over here and coming through the bottom. But I want you to see something amazing. Probably some gold on there. I think I got more gold on my floor than I do in my vial. But right away you can actually see something in here. I mean, you can already see it. So here's what I want you to see. So my header tray came to right about here, and I want you to look inside there, and you can see where these hoses were blasting straight down. It looks real clear, but look right next to that area. Look at this whole area in here, and look at over here especially. Look back over in this corner. When I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you that. Excuse all the birds around, but I want you to look in there. This is all inside what you would normally call a header box. And I'm actually going to go freestyle in a minute, and I'm going to show you more. So hold on. So here are my hoses. My hoses crash straight down in here. Okay, so you can see this area where the hoses are crashing. It looks fairly empty and clean up in here. But my header box came to right about here. Right about here. And then look inside the header box. I want you to see this. And it looks amazing when you actually get this inside of a real sluice. But this stuff is just amazing in here. Now this was all inside the header box. And the next thing I want to show you is right outside the header box. I wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you these little fines in here. Can you see those little pieces? I think you can. But there's a, right there at the end of my fingertip. That's probably a -30. It might get through a -50. That's definitely a -50. And you can see all these little fines that are sitting right up in here. You can see all these little pieces of gold right outside my header box. Really, really violent. And you can see all these pieces in here. Now the reason why this happens is because even though the water is crashing in here, the UR mat has all those little chambers inside of it, so it gives it lots of protection area, even if you're blowing it. The only places that are totally clean are in here, but you know what? I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to try and get it. Right at the end of my fingertip. There it is right there. Now that's right under the hoses. I haven't done anything to that mat. And there's a -100 sitting right there, right at the end of my fingertip. And that's right under the hoses in your crash box. And there's so much fine gold sitting up in here. It's just amazing. Now I know it's hard to look at and say, well, look at all that big gold. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't care about the big gold. I mean, dog poo, as I say, can catch the big gold, but it's this fine stuff that's amazing. This is amazing to me. And you can see those. Those are probably, those are -30s, maybe -20s, but what you really can't see is sometimes if there's some little teeny stuff, not that one, but right above it. Some little teeny stuff right above it. But this is what will amaze you if you replace your header box, instead of having a slick plate, having actual, look right there, right at the end of my fingertip. There's a little -30, it might get through a 50. Right there at the end of my fingertip. I mean, it's just full of this fine gold. And that's why we're talking about the energy situation, but we're talking about slick plates, when to use them, when not to use them. And I'm telling you folks,
we have had more success doing this than it just blows our minds. Getting rid of our slick plates and putting in the UR mat up there instead.
Okay, you know how you can tell a real prospector, someone that really loves it, is because they're waiting on some concentrates to come in, and these are actually from Arizona. I'll tell you where they're from. These are actually from Arizona, and I heard the mail truck, and I shut off the camera, and I ran outside to get it. And it's just like Christmas time every time something happens. So, hey, trust me, you never lose. Even once you go to and start working with commercial operations and start to move big stuff, what my passion really comes back down to is I enjoy going out myself, maybe another or two people, and just going out and digging in the dirt and playing with this kind of stuff. I just love it. So anyways, what we did was change it up a little bit. I decided to go ahead and classify it down to 1/8, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to run it through here, and it's going to hit that vortex, and I want that vortex to be able to catch any gold possible. So I don't want it to get plugged up. So I classified it down to 1/8, and that also allows me to take that tub. I set up, I pull the gold cube out of here, and I set it up outside because it's actually sunny and warm today. And so I can immediately take that tub and run it outside through the gold cube without having to do any more classifying or possible interfering. My concern is okay, I put it through another classifier and there's some gold in there in the classifier, and I just want to be able to just take it and run it. So I've got everything set up. I've got this set up. I've already pre-wet my gold cube, and I'll re-wet it again and level it off and make sure that's run and run it through. Again, this is concentrate, so this is real heavy stuff. Classified it down to 1/8. You're supposed to pan it 1 tablespoon at a time because there's a ton of fines in it. And I'm running 3,300 gallons an hour through the sluice, so that would be equal to a 5,000 or 6,000 gallon hour pump through a 10-inch sluice at a pretty decent pitch. And this water is moving through there, you'll see it. So am I going to have losses? You bet I'm going to have losses. But my point to this test is sort of that active exchange thing. And working heavy material, working it through a fast system, and I'm only using 32 inches of mat. And so I want to repeat that. It's only 32 inches of mat that I'm using. I'm not using a 10-foot sluice. So I better have losses, and I better have a fair amount of losses, otherwise something's wrong. But I don't think this mat can do that good with it. But let's just test it. Let's test it for some fine gold, and let's see where it falls out. So we'll fire it up and we'll go. So anyways, so you can see it, guys. This is, I'll be feeding it over by the header box. We changed that setup to even out the flow for this a little bit. I did put a flattening mat because it was just blowing out of that header box, and that really isn't good. Then of course Tom came by and plugged up the sides because I've made my mat too small for photo shooting, so we're gonna have side losses. It's way too small, so he plugged up the sides. Did all kinds of stuff, and I was like, whatever, go ahead. Too many cooks in the kitchen, I just left. But it should be set up on a pretty good flow right now, but you can see that water's moving through there. And I know we don't have riffles in it. It's a riffleless system, so it doesn't look as violent as it normally would. But then it's gonna come down here. It's gonna go into our triple catch of vortex. Then it goes into a tub basin, and in the tub basin, I take that tub basin, I'll take it outside and run it to the gold cube just to check for losses. That's how we do it. Okay guys, so we just shut down, we just did those cons, and now we're going to shut it down. So, now what I'm going to do, just so you know, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this section off here. This has all the vortex and the reverse levels in here. I'm going to take that off, and I'm going to work that material down. Then I'm going to take the full catch basin, which has all the material in there went through, and I'll run that through the cube, and we'll see what happens. Okay guys, so I did it a little differently this time. I just took all those mats, all the vortex, that end catch unit, and the material and just ran it through the cube. Because this stuff has so much fine in it that I figured I'd just do it that way. So here we go, raw panning. Okay, I need to get my jeweler's eye. So hold on. Okay, I'm back. And here's a little tip for you too. If you can pan for fine gold, two recommendations is a good magnifying glass and a jeweler's eye. This is probably about a 10 or 20 and this is a 30. But you need to be able to go in and look at just about every piece that's unknown. So I need to go in and I need to check some of this stuff. Now see, some of what I thought was gold sitting there is actually quartz. I see looks like 1 - 50 so far. A lot of people say you can't pan for -100 and -50 gold, and trust me, you can. Once you do it enough, and you learn how to spread this material out, once you learn how to spread the material across this pan gently and inspect this entire area, peek up here every once in a while. And again, while you're panning, if you're panning for real fine gold, switch in between a magnifying glass and a jeweler's eye. The magnifying glass just brings it in, lets you visually inspect, and then if you're still in question, go back to your jeweler's eye. But a lot of times I'll just hold it off the side of the pan and keep checking. Make sure you look for your side areas. Try and make sure you don't, this light is giving me a lot of glare, so I'll come over to the side. But again, we took all these concentrates, everything that went through here, anything that made it past this mat, actually we put through. So we're down to the bare minimum here. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to let you see the bare minimum I'm talking about here. Maybe you can see that. I'm down to the bare. I've got about 5 or this is all the cons that came out of the gold cube. This is all of it. So I've panned through it. I'll pan through it one more time. It looks like about 5 or 6 pieces, 150, about 3 or 4 100s, and 1 or 2, maybe 200s that I've seen in here. Again, I'm going to pan through it again, just double check, but I'm not going to make you sit through that. Then I'm going to take this mat and I'm going to run the mat through and see what we got in the mat. So that should be interesting. Okie dokie guys. Alright, now this is what came out of the mat. It's interesting because this Arizona stuff has fine white powder, like granular stuff where it's just been beaten down and beaten down. So you got to be real careful with it, because the gold will get into that white fine lights and roll down on you. And you got to be really careful here. I'm going to need some more light, and I'm going to need my glasses. Again, I have several drops of jet dry in here. There's my first piece right there. It's -50, and it's way up top, and this is what I'm talking about. Maybe I can get to show you that. This is why you gotta be careful when you're panning lights. Maybe I can show you it. I don't know. Let's see, where is it? I don't know if you can see it or not. Let me put my finger right next to it. So little -50 right there. Right next to my finger. Try not to shake, the pan's shaking.
but that's up way up high on these black sands. So you gotta be careful. Ooh, there's a bunch more. Again, this is way up high. I'm not anywhere near the bottom of this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, at least minus 50s. This is one of the reasons why we ordered this pay dirt, because it was very heavily expressed that there's a lot of fine gold in here, and you can't just pan it. Now I'm going to show you I've done 2 or 3 swirls. You may have to go here. I'm going to have to go freestyle. I've done 2 or 3 swirls and that's it. So, but I want you to see after 2 or 3 swirls, you can start to see some of that fine gold. You can see some of it showing up now. This is some fun stuff if you want fine gold. Good Lord. Now I'm going to speed it up. Oh, there's a little stringer. A little stringer in there. Every time I swirl, I'm just seeing not the big stuff. I'm talking the little stuff. This is some of the big stuff. That right there, that's some of the big stuff. 1, 2, and 3 right there. 1, 2, and 3. That's minus 50. There's minus hundreds, and there's probably 200s in here too. But ooh, that's good. That's good thing. Excuse me. Now I know you think that this is staged, but if you know me, I don't stage crap. Everything I do is real life. Well, I'm celebrating. Today's my birthday. Everybody sing. Go ahead. Sing, sing, sing. Oh, sweet tea. We drink sweet tea in the South. That's all right. So why am I celebrating? Well, it's my birthday. I turned 21. But we ran this test. And I've been wanting to run this test for almost 2 weeks. I finally found someone that was selling concentrates that said it's fine gold and blah 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 blah. Don't worry, you gotta pan it. You gotta go real slow. And so what I did is I took the mat that's going into my system, which is the UR into the header, scrubber, 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 and then UR with the 1/2 inch expanded on top of it. I ran it at 3,300 gallons per hour through the sluice, and that's a lot of water through the sluice. We were only working about 34 inches of the mat. A 34-inch long sluice, running 3,300 gallons through it, running through it at a pretty good pitch. I'm over 1 inch per foot. That's pretty steep. That water velocity was strong. And we went through the tailings. We grabbed 100% of the tailings and went through, and we ended up with 4 pieces of gold. Then we went through the mat, and as I think I probably just showed you, depending on where we are in this, it's just full of fine gold. I mean, every time I swiped a layer, I'm seeing fine gold. I mean, the majority of the gold is below minus 50. I mean, every time I sweep, I'd pull it down and I'd see stuff I wasn't even counting. Minus 50s, 100s, all that fine gold. Minus 30s, and there were a couple small little pickers in it. Nothing big, but this was all fine gold, except for the few other ones. So everything in it except for about 7 pieces was below minus 30. A ton of it was minus 50, and a lot of it was minus 100. And I'd say there's probably, we stopped counting at about 130 pieces so far. So to run this mat on this concentrates from Arizona,
We ran 20 pounds of concentrates. I stopped. I've got one more bag to run a bit. I just stopped because I might want to do something else with it, so I'm keeping it dry. And their warning is, you need to pan it out a tablespoon at a time, or use a Miller table, and that's it. They tell you not to even use, they tell you not to even use a spiral wheel or anything on it. So to be able to run those concentrates, and it was real heavy, to be able to run those concentrates through this mat at 3,300 gallons per hour, to pick up over 150 pieces of fine gold and have 4 losses on it, that just thrilled me to death. So I'm celebrating. It's my birthday. Ran a great test on a mat. Like I said, if you got a high banker, that's what I'd run. And if I had a longer high banker, again, I can't stress, you are under the mat, you are under the header box, scrubber, scrubber, scrubber. You are with 1/2 inch expanded metal on it, then go back to scrubber, scrubber, scrubber. And if you got a real long box, then go back to the other one. And let me tell you what, you can run some material down that. You can run some flow. Are you gonna have losses? Yeah, everything's gonna have losses. But what's the acceptable loss? And an acceptable loss for me is running, close to 200 pieces of gold, let's say 150 pieces of gold, that's almost all fine, almost all below -30 or -50, and having 100s in there, and finding 5 pieces in the tailings. I mean, running it at a very high volume rate, just constantly running through. So I'm just thrilled to death. That was a fantastic test because it's my mat. Alrighty, well, as you can tell, it's the next morning. I got up early and we're gonna run one more test for you. I don't know where this is going, but we ran my mat that I did test on, and you have my birthday celebration. Well, it's the day after my birthday, so there's no more cake. That's all gone. Oh, man. You'll also notice that we have little pegs along the side here, and it's because when I make these mats for this clear sluice, I can't put too much pressure on the side, so I got to cut my mats narrow. So I've got to take up a little space in there, and that's always a risk for us for losses when we're doing this. But I got to get up early, and then I got to sterilize this whole place. And I don't think a lot of people don't realize that, but since we're checking for losses, and we're checking for losses at a real minuscule level, like 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, I've got to take everything apart and I've got to sterilize it. So I've got to make sure that gold cube is completely cleaned out. I've got to make sure all these trays are completely cleaned out. They've got to be blown out, just about pressure washed. We have to break everything down, we have to sterilize the whole thing, and it's a long process. So I'm about to run another mat tray for you. And this is the one that we'd probably see in dredges, straight scrubber mat all the way down. We'd see it in stream sluices. This is what I recommend for stream sluices. A lot of people are starting to use it now. The testers are using it in their high bankers. They're just going straight with the scrubber. They're putting the UR under their header box, going scrubber all the way down if they don't have a lot of room. If they have the room, they're going a level of scrubber, then they're going into the UR with the expanded. And that goes towards the end of your tray, typically where you'll have more velocity. You'll have lower water speed here, typically up near the header box. You won't have as much velocity, but as that water starts to fall and build up momentum, you'll see that you'll have a lot more velocity down at the end of your sluice, and that UR mat with expanded likes the velocity. So put that UR back towards the end of your sluice if you have one sluice. So what I've got now is I still have about 10 pounds plus 3 or 4 pounds of concentrates. So I think it's about 15 pounds total that I've done the same thing to. I've screened it down to 1/8 of an inch so that I can take it directly out to the gold cube without touching anything else and measure for losses. So we're gonna fire this up, and I'm gonna run it at 220 gallons per inch of sluice. So I'm running 2,200 gallons per hour through this sluice, and believe it or not, a lot of high bankers run that. So there's a lot of high bankers that the amount of water going through the sluice, I'll stress that again, not what your pump is or what you think it might be. There's a lot of high bankers that actually run just over 2,000, about 2,500 gallons per hour through a 10-inch sluice or 8-inch, whatever it is. Same thing. I'm running 1 inch per foot of pitch, so I could even take that down a little bit and make it quieter. but I'm gonna fire it up and see how it looks, and I'll let you know which way I run it. But we're gonna run it through and we're gonna check for losses, and we'll see what happens. After the last result, be kind of interested to see. Knock on wood. Okay guys, I just shut it down. This was 2,200 gallons per hour. 2,200 gallons per hour at a 1 4 pitch. And my gut tells me that we're gonna have some losses because I don't think the mat was active enough, but it didn't look like it, so we're gonna see. And that's one of my fears, is that, you know, this whole premise of this mat is based on having a rapid exchange. And when you don't have that rapid exchange, it kind of bothers me. So, but here's the header box, up under the header box, and let's see if we can find some stuff. I'm already seeing minus 50s, so. And you can see right here. Let's freestyle it a bit and let's go inside the magical box. But there are those little 50s that I was talking about. Probably a 30 and a 50. There's more up here just outside the header box. There's some here. There's some here. There's here. And a little, see that little one? A little teeny one. At least a minus 50. There's a bunch of them over here. Right there. Right there. This is just outside the header box. And then inside the header box, ooh, look at that. Look at that stringer. And I hope you can see that. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Can you see that stringer right there? Dude, that is cool. That's a nice little stringer. But you got like a 30, a stringer, and then a 50, all sitting inside the header box. As far as anything visible gold, let's say down to minus 100, I didn't find one loss in here, and that's kind of amazing. That's amazing. Okie dokie. So here are I took all the cons out of the mat, ran them through the gold cube, panned that out, and now here I am back with the material from the mat. So we're going to take a look at this. I'm going to start to rip it down a little bit because
You can see all that stuff. I mean, if you can see that, the stuff you can't see are the 100s and probably some of the 50s. I mean, this thing is just loaded with it. But this was a very good result. Again, I'm very happy with this. This is a much lower, the mat wasn't as active. 2,200 gallons per hour, 1 in 4 pitch, 0 losses in the tail ends. And from the look of it, I'm gonna say probably 100 pieces of gold. But I want to stress this point. Does this mean that our mat is 100% capture rate? Absolutely not. Was this a full run test? Absolutely not. But what I am, this is not the purpose of this test. The test is acceptable losses and exchange rates. And so that's where the fine tuning, not just of our mat, but of all equipment. Whew. Okay guys, so we finished, it's late morning now, and we finished running the test on the scrubber mat alone, all scrubber. Probably, again, I always say my favorite mat, but the scrubber is one of my favorites, especially all by itself. But we rated at 2,200 gallons per hour through the sluice, which is probably a good stream sluice setting and a high banker setting. A lot of high bankers run that. So it's the first time we got some concentrates, I think, from Arizona. We've had them all over, and we had a real good run with it, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so you know, some of you are here for the first time. A lot of you here have actually watched our videos quite a bit. So I guess I wanted to save this sort of for the end. If anyone wants to buy BAGEM, they can buy a slightly used testing machine at a reasonable price. And the reason is because we don't need it anymore. We've done all of our testing. Now we'll put it out in the field and we'll let people play with it. But it's real important to understand that we get a lot of feedback from the field and from testers, and it's really good. But you gotta be able to adjust it. You gotta be able to play with it. And again, look for acceptable losses. That's what we really want. So play with your system, play with it, tune it, make sure it's active but not overly active. You're gonna have to fine tune it. But one of the reasons why we're getting rid of BAGEM is because we're about to come out with an announcement on a machine that we've actually come out with that we've had to keep kind of secret for a while. We'll have the patent process done in a couple of days, so by the time you see this video, the patent process will have been filed on it. It's exciting, and it's actually where the name Gold Hog came from. But this has been, it actually came just like our mats, it came from our testing. It was developed, we started to say why and why not, and what you're going to see is you're going to see an amazing machine that's coming out. We've already had it in the field many times. And I guess since I'm going to wait and post this video, after the patents, all the patents have been filed, then I guess I can tell you. But it's a self-classifying high banking / dredge / all-in-one unit that one person can operate. It's pretty transportable. It's not real small, but it's an amazing unit. We use it all the time now. But because the unit, what we did was, and I want you to, before you see that video of the Gold Hog, we haven't given it a specific name yet. We may just call it the Gold Hog. Before you see that video, I want you to understand how we came up with it.
And what we did is we said, okay, let's make a checklist. If I could have anything in the world that I wanted as a prospector or even as a miner, what would I want? Would I want a trommel? Yeah, I want a trommel sitting on top of my high banker. Okay. So why do you want that? Because I want to pre-classify. In other words, I want to be able to dump. I want to be able to just shovel out of the ground and just dump and not stop and have something pre-classified material before it enters my sluice bed and get it down to 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch. So that's all I'm running through the machine. Okay, what else? Well, then I want to be able to run several matting surfaces, not just one surface. What can I do for that? Okay, so we solved that. Then I want to be able to run it on either a gas engine or I want to be able to run it in battery powered pumps. Okay, so we made it solve that. What else? So I want to be able to run it all day. I want to be able to put huge amounts of material. We ran a test and with, and we'll show you some of this footage when we release it, but we ran a test of 3 guys. I took 3 guys up with 1 shovel, and in 4 hours we moved 5.5 tons of material through this one unit, the Gold Hog, we'll call it. It's sort of the Ferrari of high bankers. It can be used as a dredge, so if you want to convert it over to a 2 or 2.5 or even a 3-inch dredge, you can convert it over to a dredge. The nice thing is then once you do that, and then if you want to use it, let's say you don't have a gold cube and you want to do, you want to sort of super concentrate or pre-concentrate your concentrates, you can actually convert this unit into a concentrator. And what we do is we use that concentrator stage, we pan it, and then we put it through the gold cube. But you can run all types of mattings in this. You don't have to run ours in it. You can run whatever you want. If you want to run riffles and miner's moss, if you want to run vortex, run it. But anyways, it's an exciting unit where you can go ahead, and I think what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to see the videos I've released here. It's had 7 prototypes all the way through the generations of it till the final unit. It's not a mass production unit, and I don't see putting into mass production. All these units are custom made. So when you order one, your unit is custom made for you. It's just an amazing beast. So I know that's a teaser for you, but when it comes out, it's going to be a real neat unit, and we think everyone will enjoy working with it. Again, it's not a solve-all, it's not the golden egg, it's not the perfect whatever. It's just an option. But I will say it's the most flexible and versatile unit I've ever seen. And it was a result of really how we started off with our testing. We said, well, why don't we put all this, what we're doing, our testing, into a high banker and sluice system? So we did. So get ready for that, and hopefully that video will be out shortly, and we'll show you some stuff on it. And we'll see you later, guys. Thanks.